Welcome to Pivotal People. Today we're speaking to Paul Kelly. Paul is the Deputy Regional Director for Unity Trust Bank. Hi Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really lovely to see you. First of all, we're going to go back to the beginning and find out a little bit about what made you the man you are now. So take you right back to your childhood. Tell me about your childhood, about growing up and where you were and what you were doing.
Well, I grew up in a real family-orientated community in South London. Went to school in Fulham. We're a very close-knit family. So literally, my grandmother was 7 doors. It almost reminds me of the old East End when you hear these stories. But literally, my grandmother and grandfather were 7 doors away from my mum, my 2 sisters and I. Yeah, went to school in South London. Went to university more by default because I didn't really know what I was going to do with myself or go to the army. And I was kind of trying to find out about the world and world affairs. So I ended up doing a degree in politics with economics. So that gave me, kind of a great grounding into just political landscapes, what was going on with people, because it is people are at the heart of economics and politics. And got to meet a whole diverse range of people that I wouldn't normally have met in Tooting in South London.
Just go back a little bit. Tell me a little bit more about your grandmother.
So I was partially raised by my grandmother in my informative years, and my grandfather was also a big influence. I think my grandfather, though I've only thought about it and reflected in time, has also had an impact on my life. He was an Irish immigrant who came over just during the wartime. His background was he was a cleaner at Battersea Power Station when it had full industry in the UK, and then just by chance got the ability to become a shopkeeper in South London. So had real entrepreneurial spirit, worked all the hours God sent. And then my grandmother was the homemaker. So she was the homemaker to 5 kids. She'd grown up in a house of 9 kids. And then, I kind of, because she was so locally placed near to where I lived and my mum, I actually was kind of taken in by her and used to spend more time in her house from my early teens. I think I filled the void of her sons leaving home, her younger sons. So they were really, really impactful and inspirational into my life, my grandparents.
So going forward, so you've gone to university. You've got that fantastic education.
Yeah.
And what happened next after university?
Well, we're going to use. So I took a course that was quite open-ended because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I thought politics covers everything, economics is kind of how the world works. Let's get like kind of a broad brush education into life. Well, I met people from really diverse backgrounds, and I guess the entrepreneurial kind of element of things, kind of when I was at university, is I had to work at the same time. I wasn't funded, and we had a good fee structure there, but I was doing all kinds of things from scaffolding to working for famous retailers to sales to you name it. I did it. I even worked in a hospital in West London, which was a great experience, and that was kind of my first dalliance into health and social care. I absolutely loved that job. I also worked at a local council and met Wandsworth Council, met some great people there, and all these kind of people became informative. I then got a job at a bank just doing project work. So it was post 9/11. A lot of the banks didn't know the sources of wealth of some of the, well they did, but they needed a lot more scrutiny in terms of the client base that they had, not just in the UK but internationally. So I got to work what you would call in a compliance function, find out the sources of wealth, know your client, any money laundering, any kind of banking jargon. Tina stopped me, but I got to look into the intricacies of where people would earn their money. And at the back of my mind, I still got this kind of home network that I've got an entrepreneurial granddad in the back. I've only thought about this retrospectively, but it all started to click. So went to university, but then I did a master's in international relations, and then I met people from all over the globe. Amazing. And their experience from Brazil to China to Canada to Germany, and that really broadened my horizons.
I'm sure. And I think travelling the world. My father was a geography teacher and always told us that travel broadens the mind, and it absolutely does.
He's right. Yeah. And I got to travel. So I got to travel with work. So as part of the work I was doing with Barclays at the time, is I did get to travel the world and work on client files. Don't worry, I wasn't any mover and shaker making deals or big corporate deals, but I got to interact with the families and so on and so forth. And then, that was my first formative years. And then I moved to an American bank, which was a totally different culture. Culture being a real kind of guiding principle. It was totally different, and that was right up until the economic crash that beset us in around the 2008 period, and then I changed back to Barclays in a completely different capacity. And funnily enough, the circle completed, I started working with small business owners and entrepreneurs, which unbeknown, that was the starting point of where my kind of granddad's background was.
So you're going back in time.
Yeah, without knowing it,
Yeah. From then, what got you from there to where you are now? Because it feels like you're still doing the same sort of thing. How did you get into healthcare?
Well, I got into healthcare, so I had a really kind of broad experience in banking. So I worked in a segment that would be business banking and kind of mid-corporate. So you got your owner manager, literally the man or woman that not only runs the sales, they run their own HR, they do everything. The one-man bands up to the 25 employees, up to the 150. And kind of Barclays, not Barclays, but just banking in any kind of mid-market or business banking segment, you'll go up, and you'll go up with clients in terms of sophistication, their demands. As they grow, you grow. Well, that was the natural course of things. It's still pretty similar today. And I kind of fell into so just to be clear, I have dealt with every kind of industry type known to man. The key element that underpins everything are people.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So I used to get in trouble at school because on my report is I used to talk too much. Well, now I do it for a living, so that's great. So I actually found my calling. But the key thing was people, irrespective of what sector they were done, how they interacted with who they sold to, if they sold a service or some kind of other thing that they sold, or if they dealt with people from HR or just internally within their own organisations. It was I was quite successful, I was good at dealing with people, and it became to light that I then met Paul Burley, who was then the head of healthcare at Barclays. He said, look, you're showing the trends of a capable bank manager in old money or relationship manager. You should really think about looking at sector and specialising. And it was through having experience, not for Paul's team, because he ran healthcare for Barclays at the mid-corp and large corp sector, so dealing with some of the big household names. I started to carve out a niche of actually dealing with elderly care operators, specialist care when it wasn't really called specialist care. Interaction with retirement villages, which were new conceptual things. I already had some experience in kind of early years and primary care. So then I started to build a book of clients and stakeholders and people that I just generally would work with that were healthcare aligned.
Do you ever draw on that experience of working in a hospital when you're talking to people who are working in that environment?
I do, because I tell you what, the key were the management and the staff made it, the environment was. It was fun, but just giving people a sense of decency, interacting with the patients and the staff. It was fun, but it was all pulling together. We've got an objective to meet, not with a spreadsheet and a target necessarily, which is a way to measure. We have measures, but kind of the measure for me, the barometer there was just the sense of happiness we had. And I really enjoyed it. I only moved it because I went on into a career in bank. I could have done more, who knows.
Okay, so from there to now, how you got from there to Unity Trust?
Well, how I got to Unity Trust Bank is I was obviously mixing in the circles where I was doing lots of social care and healthcare related transactions. I then, funnily enough, went up in competition against one of the leaders there, who then got to know my name, that I was doing transactions. It's all about who you know and who's in the ecosystem. I was getting quite well known in the social care, but also in primary care. And then I was invited to join. And I was at that stage of my life, like an inflection point. It was just before COVID, right? So we're looking at summer 2019. So
you're entering healthcare with Unity Trust at a time when we're going to be hit by the biggest crisis in healthcare ever.
Yeah, so you couldn't. So it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. So without any preconceptions, I was doing enough, but I wanted to do more. Right, so you'll have certain caps that you have in certain sectors, depending where a bank is in its growth phase, and I really wanted to do more, and I felt I had the skill sets, people-wise, to take it to a different brand, or in America they'd say franchise. Right, I wanted to see, am I as good for my own self-development? Was I the brand, or was it me? I wanted to see if I could take it to a relatively unknown brand. Franchise and see if I could be successful. Now, what was the big attraction for me to Unity Trust Bank was the values piece. So Unity's quite interesting in the way it measures success, because it measures success not just in commercial terms but social impact. I'll give you an example. So we do a qualitative and quantitative measure on where we deploy our finance. So we don't just deploy finance because we're going to have it paid back. Any bank can do that. We do it so we can make actually a socially impactful good. Are we creating more care homes? Are we creating more care beds? Are we creating more employment in care? Are we helping with homelessness in social housing? Are we helping dentists and primary care? It could be from GPs to pharmacists grow and serve their community with a much focus on providing finances in areas of deprivation as well. We live and breathe the fact, and it's genuine. It's not just a gimmick because it's a corporate responsibility have to do, where it's really genuine, and that was really appealing to me as well.
Yeah,
it's something that's values aligned as well as commercially aligned.
Yeah, I think though in our organisations, in the care organisations, if you've got the quality, you make the money, and if you're doing all that stuff. That's how
it goes hand in hand. So I'll give you anecdotal. I was sent on basically a reconnaissance mission by Mr. Paul Burley when working. I never reported to him directly, but when I would go into settings, there's an alignment between how people are treated, how the management and the staff feel, to the financial outputs, to the CQC, which we all know that obviously the regulator has got its challenges, and that measure is a point in time. But there is a correlation between the financial outputs, the regulatory inputs, as well as the general well-being of staff, service users and their families. Yeah. They're intertwined. It couldn't be more intertwined, actually.
I don't think there's another industry that has that, you tell me if I'm wrong, but that has that intertwining.
One similar one would be early years as well, where your staff and your management team are so important and integral to the outcomes for young children. We know how important that is from the early years, from 2 to 3 years. It's the same in a care home setting or an elderly care setting or a specialist care setting. It's fundamental.
I'm just going to take you back one more time.
Yes.
Go right back to that young boy living down the road from his grandma.
Yeah.
If you could go back as you now and speak to him, what advice would you give him?
I probably had relatively misspent youth in the sense I wish I would have educated myself more.
Okay.
The younger generation don't realise how lucky they are in terms of information is at the end of your hand. It's in a little square device. I won't go into name brands. I wish I would have consumed more education early on, which wasn't accessible. Now that was all. There was for various reasons. You'd be distracted. You have football. You just have life in general. I wish I would have engaged earlier, and I've really brought the education piece through to my 3 girls to really pursue that. Not overly intensive. You've got to want to do it. You've got to want to do it. I think as a young man, I didn't want it. I just wanted to get on in life and experience life as I could. I just wish I'd have started a bit earlier. That's all I say.
I think you became very successful without that anyway. So you've obviously had an amazing career, and people are going to be very interested in it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.